afternoon. This is Cal State Long Beach reporting live from the Dartmouth Round Robin with important news from the people living in extinction now. Can I get a witness?
This is an ongoing emergency. Don't panic. You're already living in it. But bombs been dropping everywhere we go from Long Beach to Dartmouth. We're living in the apocalypse now. But it seems that Texas, DK, and Tyler are the customers of the wars that are happening right now. I've heard pieces before the cloud been our face off the bomb. No discriminate due to winter, mass starvation, people go hungry in the climate thing. You want to know what we think about the topic? We do not think about U.S. China, Taiwan, SCS. It's not talking about Russian furious for driving SK to Ukraine. Not about Aiken or King, IER, talking to Indian nuclear plane. Though the dirty bomb not been a thing in the 20th anniversary, not limit attack. We think about the nuclear bomb and slavery dropping in 1526 as Africans were taken from their homeland and families being used probably for went to war for 300 years. That took about 12 million souls. We think about the nuclear bomb of the Emancipation Proclamation of all problems for political stuff for Lincoln to gain popularity to become president. We aren't thinking about we were getting problems for because the just the bomb dropped us that we weren't getting it from slavery to Jim Crow, from Jim Crow to slavery in the 13th to slave patrol to the police and the plantation for redlining and segregation. The bomb just kept on coming. CIA, crack under only black community and cycle addiction, algorithm policing and disadvantage black around neighborhoods, creating alcohol, to live the atmosphere that exists in the city of Los Angeles, New York, Detroit, Chicago, and more. Negative say actually good. You mean state-sponsored neglect like medical anti-blackness, battling crisis, and job discrimination, massive threat, HIV in black community, deterrence good. Oh, you mean the bombing of black Wall Street and Tulsa, Philly, never gonna move, etc. 16 Street, Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, crackdown on black liberation as far as time can tell. All good black people insecure, future for herself, no sensitivity change. How about in 2080 for victims of or BLC and 48% were trans women and 77% killed 36 killed by romantic partner, friendly friend, and member 48% were misgender and detonated by authorities or the press. Oh, I get it. The bomb don't discriminate. That's why politicians want to bomb Mexico. Did people are systematically deprived of access to basic infrastructure like water, electricity, at the Asian hate ground, all-time high, etc. Where the U.S. is helping interdrop weapons of mass destruction on past time. We are not approaching the end of the war. We're already living it. You're scared of the nuclear winter, indiscriminate, violent, and apocalyptic conditions. We've been there, done that from NFU insurance and disarmament events. We ship the topic where we have run this series. On the that end in universality discourse, the nuclear war is the urgent impact to avoid whitewashing the apocalyptic condition. Or white supremacy has termed life death before and after the bomb is backing up. 19 nuclear things I claim no limit time in the nation, the United States, United States, United States, by the fake nuclear war, the only way we make it us by active intellect that different widely conform the line and line always determined. Bomb white from nuclear things will not be universal, but like America, the last of the things also represent for your black spider countries like it's supposed to represent theory of the disease or race will determine life on the only bomb, but after the white service leader struck the bill, jail support people, color struck for the city and their outfit would be the people attend, inform the intersecting the post-apocalyptic areas and the war post-apocalyptic conditions, slavery, offer attack for the jumping and traditional debate fears a different approach to the topic because the style of debate associated with blackness requires to confront the overreaching fear with the loss of fairness all the became for feel like a nuclear weapon they're younger than our residents do because our not very foundation America's rights to white today because I'm like to see right and black people are there for something securitized against right peaceful teaching the mod outreach reminding many deaths of black and brown people across the globe were due to the embodiment of civil defense pedagogy. That means that the future of America comes as deterrence of black future that's early 20 generations for civil defense and the recent infrastructure determined the middle of the permit other than often other red line politics find the black people on the black men black the value neighborhood climate face for finding urban industry disposable they came never to defend the nuclear arm the world city heroes over damage so many civil cities disposable allow for disaster defense the civilian like their massive consequences have prevents the nuclear conflict nuclear negative like a high profile line for having more bombs drop on communities every day in the white family and to the effects of white America not who is only because of nuclear threat of the nation but because of the annihilation of black city certain has a resolution to racial contrast some crisis and from the destruction of black neighborhoods is supposed to threat a nuclear war from another pure power the fantasy of nuclear conflict and the search for a correct nuclear posture created that for the benefit of sustaining violent infrastructure for right to prevent the future we must disarm the civil defense pedagogy that caused whites to take no step with nuclear weapons that's me 23 Policing history. Policing was history. This was even people nuclear fantasy. Take away racial practicing race and not be absent. Oversight race. The race and not race. The enjoyment of race hierarchy. Based on nuclear policy take place in the context of the problem. This is a pleasure. Open the right relation question. However, it affects subjectivity. Just made this at the end of the approach with just how dialogue sustained and consider how the disarming nuclear human entanglement and directly addressing this race hierarchy. The nuclear race fantasy not to the resources have to the marketing but do so world every economics by atomic genocide and nuclear scenario planning is a form of civil defense pedagogy that's informed due intra-convergence. When you hear the word Texas others, nuclear war affect black people too. It is a white supremacist guide that only saves black life from men. White life is disabled living. That's present. 2008 when you were over the rapid nature of nuclear attack and writing a frame with writing paper and the information of the point home second and finding this is the argument where presenting African who are good to on ground there might be cause racial attacks of the introversion isolation the white news play the public actually by nothing to the African who do maintain the interest right into the hardcore racial free anxiety working this by the active visual defensive teacher and racial education waited to say the patriot factor and the utility of cars and to that routine the first when nuclear war is the civil defense and the cuisine the ways of identity has been acknowledged for her to another content from racialized others and black people should not come at any cost. My experience with nuclear nuclear weapons brought to my community family may not be pretty, but my future looks like a warlord with black and brown and other items. One marginalized population do not have to worry about nuclear bombs dropping them with a future with simple defense logic right off into the wind, making future reasonable for everyone. Oh wow, only if we have meant to getting there does we. Some people advocate for the disarmament of nuclear forces of civil defense do atomic after future, and that's the one they see before enemies by remembering the future through the past of slavery, which produces the general conditions for black lives. That's backing off 19 nuclear criticism and focusing on the nuclear word, not the chemical experience in the world that before talking of future after black and warfare, nuclear power, nuclear half life also want to do that all the anti-nuclear pieces of the academic future in the working memory have to say we have been producing the you're going to mother research about the future of the United States, the receiver they have to refer to as model bound the represented in well, the future one time regards the future, rather really just present future. And in order to combat black futurists, we must align ourselves with black and brown people on the ground now that are fighting against the populace from groups such as Be More the Black Women Build, see the resistance long from other liberatory groups that fight for black future. We must align ourselves with the pedagogy of black liberation movement in order to create black future that beyond the end of the world. Thus, our performance anti-nuclear jazz in the body form, a person that carves out space for black resistance that jam tram, to a delicate proximity of religion, might tell her start trading about the break down barriers to jazz. How do I live more black religion, not fighting that, how the religion, but the only turning from the wrong to, but the issue and spent in the fables with the person they want more about who call the national guard of black integration, and as are resisting in nuclear weapons, the nuclear war, the food of the nuclear weapons, they're highly resistant and special to the next ability, no pressure, we just are when you got, when you go around, you feel like a romance, ability, because the trying conversation back to the university, back about the bomb in Hiroshima, horror history, the race of black race on the music, and this form of post-memory, it refuses the circulation of white press in favor of circulating black resistance, which is historically mobilized community that does so twitchy out of you, already was already circulating black because the white major, and now black is all the able to basically reveals the new white hair, the shoe off, and all like the work already, the black red, how do I decide the person acting the black president above every from to white, first of all, post-memory Christian, now getting interpreting most violent tools, ridiculous problems, the violence makes a visible was to give our white against visible rendering and history of the black very murder down the movement, which are memory often taking organized future, or making a critical assessment of the fastest future of post, very offer free to the outlets that pass all the rights people like to organize and learn from, and then we can into the violence how to criminal learn for black people and potential for the critical masses of the black the violence that tells us to come to and the top offender and the dead, share images, bear witness, and transform the reading into rinses as well as feels spread throughout the black community and the like civil rights movement the press has immense power. And against the nuclear forces of civil defense in debate, we challenge resolution to a radical state support that set of critical revolutionary class necessary for epistemological growth that's been 2020 understanding of where the great moments are already after the executive party resolution and advocate for amendment parts of the debate will be over our history and way well. So arguably like where the top of the very line on the trying to hear I have the reasons and the critical to the point of the topic and probably like rubbing into this and be the little and important negative ground for organization for reason kind of meeting our argument and engagement kind of minute after the argument and the branch UI preparing to broadly more to the debate range on the 14 things to such as future on black and traditional nuclear debates maintain a hegemonic train that nuclear and that reach and status quo adversity 2022 hegemonic anti-nuclear circulating with non-nuclear talking testing that nuclear say on the nuclear understanding about state war power and training on cycle organization to inside engagement for the body and for the vote and substitute other things we have no anti-nuclear can to be absent, Callahan, you or Thur, judge instruction for you to evaluate your paradigm when you think specific testing is. Just because we don't use the words miscalc, vertical, prolific, user, or elusive pressures in the boxes does not mean that we are shallow or like nuance, what sounds like generic jargon to you. This is slightly racist fear to engage in various competition or it can be the features of black and brown theorizing. Even debates like futurism versus pessimism today that season works on debates of unpacking questions like coalition, humanism, resistance tactics, and how we engage in historical archives review the way black is all require extremely detailed testing that is valuable for us to engage in, even if you're reluctant to philosophical nihilism when text is rather opposite limits and grounds in the disouts and the truancy, you should read it through a lens of white comfort instead. Vote after carve out a space for radical black and brown organizing. One, we still promote resolution of debates of question nuclear policy, inform black and brown life in the everyday. We have taken a stance on the topic of future while negative teams can argue things like black bombs good for the sake of deterrence, etc. Second, reasonability any classroom testing argument. You as a white person who debated in the past should understand your method for what is good. Classroom testing through a very particular frame is biased or traditional methods of debate that are not formed for UDL. People like me and Diego, small schools, and other parts of the community, we have listed, even if we have listed sufficient, if we have listed sufficient ground that's predictable and has the potential to lead to good debates and debates, then that should be good enough, because good is good enough. Officers, these paradigm of the false thinking code, we never give way to arguments that are more acceptable towards our past engagement with them. My timer got messed up.
So it's like 2 seconds.
Okay, that's fine. Whoopsies.
Okay. Who is we some people?
We think that we'll read definitions for the ways in which advocating the do we some people is a metric that challenges white supremacy, because we think that the U.S. is a settler colonial state built off of genocide and enslavement. We think that we some people
who is we some people?
So we some people is a direct counter to when the United States Constitution like starts with like we the people. We the people symbolizes only white people because the like Declaration of Independence and Constitution was only written by and for white people. We some people is a re-articulation of that to include people who are excluded by the racial contract of the U.S. Constitution.
Which we think challenges nuclear civil defense forces in
Okay, so for instance, would Het and I be constituted under we some people?
I mean, if you want to lose to a perm?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, no, I'm not saying that we can advocate. We're advocating the F. I'm just understanding.
I'm
we
kind of
Well,
confused.
like, yeah, like-
I'm kind of confused on what
definition
this
of
like
we some
gets you. Like,
Like if you're not white, then we some people encompasses people who are excluded
Okay,
under the racial
So
contract.
Thur could not be in we some people.
Well, no, I think that we some people is not just like non-white people, but I think it's also a political stance that says that you should align yourselves towards liberation that includes people.
yeah, like
Okay.
Tyler voting AF means that he said in solidarity with we some people advocating for atomic fusion, which is good, which is the bearing witness stuff that the Dust Hole stuff talks about.
Okay, I got you. The next question I have is about something you said early on in the 1AC.
Yeah.
Which was, quote, the nuclear bomb of slavery.
Yeah.
What makes slavery a nuclear bomb?
Because we think that one, we have articulated civil defense forces as a reason for why anti-blackness exists, which means that it inherently is a nuclear force because civil defense logic determines what is or what is not a threat, which is inherently embedded in the double-sided, we think the resolution is a double-sided coin, right? You read deterrence, which destroys black life, or you enforce civil defense logics that see blackness as a threat to white life and something to be get rid of, right? We think that articulates it as a nuclear force, which is a good analytic that the AF thinks is good.
1352.
How many of them?
To the case.
Is this y'all's? Like
Yeah, I can move it.
yeah.
My fault.
Can we connect these? Let me just open it.
Yep.
I haven't got anything.
Okay. Got it?
Yes.
I have
looks like
not.
just open.
I was just wondering if it was me or the wife.
I'm just opening it. Alright, I'm good.
First off, Tom County Next Now, we're joined on top class. United States means government, permanent, anti-executive, intent taking extraordinary meaning the U.S. and nation through the federal government is ensuring to consistent with this. Given our trouble, the fact that the term U.S. does not include private entities, restrict requires limitation relative to sex code, and to restrict means limits or decrease. Modification is not restriction. Modification must restrict compared to the original. It belongs to the government. Up to event 91. They have note that singular hits not carrying the U.S. in singular. Nuclear forces mean delivering warheads and warheads themselves. Larson and 12 nuclear compasses means delivering warheads and warheads themselves. The combination that provides military capability. Disarming requires the entire arsenal of warheads and delivery vehicles to be dismantled. England in 22. What is nuclear disarmament cases would be instances of nuclear reannotation. Questions: what it would take for current nuclear powers to disarm nuclear? Disarmament involves complete relinquishment of arsenal, physical dismantlement of all nuclear warheads, means delivery actions. A nuclear state to take win recognition of nuclear under the NPT. Vote negative for fairness and clash. Unbounded topics deny. A role of negation. Debate is innately competitive, which creates an incentive for teams to retreat from controversy and forces the neg. To first characterize the AF, then debating, which eviscerates and evacuates the benefits of detailed private research. Any impact intrinsic debate as opposed to discussion comes from negation. Topical states is produced produces iterative, in-depth strategies that are prerequisite to debate pedagogical value. The ground listed at the bottom of the one you see is concessionary. The model destroys predictable limits independently, turns the case well-prepared opponents, creates barring parts, failures to iterate, produces false positives on presumption. Their model is not reasonable, forces extremist and exclusionary impact turns, which turns all their offense. Now, next off, the critique. Rhetoric is deploying tropes to feign unicity in the face of failed unicity. Human communication emancipates from the desire to comprehend the real and overcome the inevitable failure of subjective experience to approximate true meaning. Metaphor is a tool of the symbolic economy of tropes that weaves together different imaginaries to get closer to truth. Each metaphor of nuclear force is an effort to express the reality of nuclear warfare. Methods 18. The subject gains according to the mirror stage of the moves and fragments, alienating identity. The mirror stage also describes our entry in symbolic. We enter the economy of language, reduced to identity. A signifier is capable of being linked together with others, identify the subject with the imaginaries order, meaning invested in specific symbols and symbolic governs connection between through the metaphor of the social. I comes at a cost, alienation, the nagging sense of incompletion never goes away, the lack of vacuum left, identification with limited engine, desire why we see things that access biological needs. Each object seems for something else, and signifying that as the bond with the object petite. The subject desires to continue that world that would undermine the conditions for subject to exist. Each subject desire remains perpetual, unified the real in the access that seems that exists beyond meditation, momentary experience of continuing language. It's paradoxical medium through which we try to communicate experiences that consider incommunicable to death. We try to insist towards a series of objects, but expand out one object into another. The tools of rhetoric are necessary death, and this is dissolution of the subject. The real is a traumatic experience of reality, solved the Cletos, failed unicity and failed feigned unicity. The impact operates as an economy of tropes where the kind of fabric has precondition of meaning. This idea of feigned unicity helped the witness together nuclear testing witness. And this is an attempt to make sense by the experience by which fitting in the closest available discourse compensates the trauma of the real without losing the sense of all that inspired. The one he sees metaphorization of nuclear forces repeats the concealment thesis of nuclear criticism. The effort to communicate the racist legacy of urban redlining in terms of nuclear forces intends to reveal the troop of violence of broader policing. However, its metaphorical treatment invests in the fantasy of nuclear warfare. The one he sees continues the process of repetition compulsion whereby hawks and doves desire the power of the bomb. Turns case Mattson 18 to understand the bomb. In metaphors reflect the preoccupation of rhetoric, a political awareness change of the symbolic connection. The bomb is organizing metaphor symbolic of human alienation and the agency the scholarship believes. Reminder of the terror and effective compulsion to repeat this. We should instill skepticism of the effects of stress you need to confront the nuclear events, but challenge against discretion conceal what thesis. It is believed that successful gathering to heal the horror of nuclear war implication is not providing new but popular public debates would enable democratic the economy of nuclear discourse has been driven by the attempt to get closer to the real but how the bomb as it really is. Engage scholarship criticism not only language of law but underlying ecology desires to say that the progressive idea that a proper understanding of the reality of nuclear weapons can facilitate debate and deliberation to address its root cause is fantasy. The one I see does not occur in a vacuum. The alt-right will co-opt the framing of regulation as an extension of nuclear deterrence to accelerate nuclear modernization. The right wing will launch onto Hurley's apocalyptic framing to attack counter-insurging survival tactics. It also turns case Mattson 18. The death trench is just a different theory of metaphor. Metaphor is a dynamic process of the one-way substitution replacement of determinant lose not at the end. There's a cathartic investment in the relationship between the terms sort of the trade connects and the tribe. The desire for the real implicates anti-nuclear politics, anti-nuclear scholarship adopts the new concealment theory system that God terms were replaced with devil terms and impeded debate by the current nuclear forces might be constrained. However, the anti-nuclear scholarship has that uncanny resonance, sublime discourse of the bomb and seeks to avoid the real that makes nuclear imagination out of enjoyment. The concept of the death drive is desire for unmediated experiences suggests a change language of expression and taboo would not automatically change the investments that pin together nuclear warfare as cultural technology critique aimed at making the reality of nuclear war present language systems to our investment in nuclear war in the first place. Metaphor operates in cycle of 4 to da, where changing the one signifier means distinctive absence, the source of enjoyment, sense of power over presence, absence, the danger of seeking the reality of nuclear warfare in its language. The alt-right have become to channel towards the institute of power nuclear war. It's not reach audiences in vacuum efforts to communicate the potential horror resulted in terms of liberation. So reliance, hostility, tower groups to emphasize individual responsibility for survival. Even when horror inspires political engagement, there's no guarantee that anti-nuclear initiatives result in nuclear imaginations might justify either disarmament or more aggressive nuclear policy. The truth of the one I see gets assumed by the nation's libidinal investment in fantasies of nuclear, universal nuclear victimhood, attention to violence of urban planning gets subsumed in the spectacle of human ending nuclear catastrophe. It lets white liberals off the hook by insinuating they're equal approximate victims of urban planning that turns the case by erasing the unique textures of violence that pervade the urban communities to Nito and 21. The use of metaphorical language is condemned the wake of Hiroshima. What is the relationship between fantasy discourse and actual victims? The tactics are powerful multi-valence that will use this to actual bombings that test and fear to explore the political anxieties. These metaphor reviews to allow separation of Americans for their role as perpetrators of Americans, rallied images to express the fears of becoming the attackers for 9/11 Americans. The opposite gain invoked the language of nuclear attacks to express national victim to expect the fear of atomic bomb victims who destruct the medium of language represent the experience of representation long history of invoking the nuclear reveals our shared public consciousness where citizens over-imagine themselves the victims of nuclear annihilation. This relies on uncomfortable calculated victim as a collective idea of victim consciousness for correlation of atomic around Fukushima can turn in the wordplay that also responsibility to shake the large scale be harder to win the actual pain borne by the residents of Fukushima. Vote negative to reject the representational enclosure of the bomb. Voting negative acknowledges the 1AC's attempt to synthesize nuclear warfare and the 1AC is a form of violence that erases singularity of individuals and events it claims to represent. Fair sorrow. And 11, the mushroom cloud circulates ubiquitously. The arm is called different sort of individuals that obstruct the image signal the violence that representation enclosure tells the paradox of expressing inexpressible. The archival imperative is always represented institutions and kind of forgetting that serious substances depend on relation and work of scientific system that makes sense that ever belong to the event requires a representation of events a price and is unimaginable particulars in the case of atomic bombings. The singularity of each death is funneled into grand figure. Adorno holds the ethical necessity of recognition of object singularity, whether discrete thing venture person the application of the concept that negates the latter singularity. Ethical thinking would conceptualize the appreciation of concepts and ability to capture the object. We must take explicitly out between the words that think and control participate in an uncritical consignatory system that embraces the difference, care for difference, the generosity is not attempt to grasp whether it is other at one's own interest and itself motivated the drive to secure traumatic remains through substitution, suffering and sort of coping mechanisms, a way of consolidating what she already knows. Now the case, vote neg on presumption A. There's no connection between Long Beach call for disarmament of civil defense and debate and the actual dismantling of nuclear forces outside. Belief the discursive intervention debate spills out to broader subject formation school optimism that turns case B. There's no practical connection between atomic features, some of the CIA-sponsored crack, and algorithmic policing of black neighborhoods. The need a mechanism to decode racist AI and prevent government infiltration to win the scope of solvency matches the scope of their impacts. Otherwise, presumption C. No valid key warrant vote neg and agree the app's good idea without subject to competitive forum that forces disagreement that turns the case as pro-topicality arguments above. And D. Movements for black liberation are ongoing and detached from debate. Ongoing movements now receive more resources, funding, or assistance from Long Beach advocacy and debate. Even if debate raises consciousness about productive forms of advocacy, skills do not translate outside space unless they're tied to detailed debates about mechanisms. So there's only a risk of offense. 2. Fighting against militaristic nuclear policies sparks broader political change. Bargain 12. Nuclear weapons are the state of the terror states that use the nuclear threat as justification are so repressive policy, surveillance, criminalization, maybe crucial impact on government's rights of the opposition states typically greater than deployment words that public and restraining leaders to anti-bomb campaigns to prevent a nuclear war, nuclear war causing massive devastation in the environment to usher the more repressive world order. Could argue as long as the military system exists, destruction will remain a threat. Campaigning against nuclear weapons is valuable, and if it reduces risk of a nuclear war, governments will only act under pressure, getting people involved. Nagging actions and questions challenge government policy changes people's understanding of themselves and the world. Those who challenge the systems to pursue radical alternatives make a distinction between reform and revolution. The dichotomy picture of change shows the system new replace the generation effort to make the world a better place. Now for the reform of the vote capacity and movement towards radical alternatives. The question of the system can lay the foundation for the change making people receptive that opens to students. The question of the existence of the military reform can be very positive systems, but it can lay the basic continued change efforts. There are opportunities even in the heart of the oppressive systems. Methods can use the importance of goals. Getting the means right means important the purity of goals. 3. Do not defer to a standpoint of epistemology, table, and 20. The call to listen to the most affected with central to the most marginalized ubiquitous. It's not meant handling controversial authority. Those who mostly segment the social categories associated with regardless of what they actually do or know the experience. The norms of studying point epistemology is the practice of differing in this way can work kind of marginalized groups and ensure access to room and social advantage gained through the prior advantage state. Most likely to be more positive because of the way the systematically defer the very people that are asked to represent the must appearance of a difference to figures from oppressed communities is performance sanitize apologize to correct the fact that differ has enough in the room proves for lifting up the perspective to be the consequence. And lastly, the absonic method of radical activities itself an effective repetition economy turns case low. And 18, the recording is all between social control allows the power not to enact and distributes this talk about memory and the power they study and transmission replication new scientific program that assesses the problems surrounding Western technology from the representation with the record. That card is marked at appearance.
You said the marker.
Yep.
I just put a lot of enters wherever.
That's fine.
Oh, I'm going to delete the card.
Are you good? Status of the off.
Status code is always an option.
So content.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. The link to the critique. What is it?
Metaphorization of nuclear forces.
Is it just a metaphorization?
Yes.
So because we said nuclear metaphors are good, then the only competition the critique generates is metaphor is good, metaphor is bad.
Yes, we are in fact turning the metaphorization of the
Makes sense. Does the alternative do anything to resolve the violence that goes on in black communities now?
Yes, because it describes that violence as a result of the political economy. The violence described when we asked you in cross-examination of the violence of slavery that occurs in the status quo, we should describe that violence as is, not metaphorize
cool.
it to the nuclear.
I guess like this third piece of Matheson evidence isn't. Well, I think it doesn't just talk about metaphors, right? It talks about the ways in which we desire the bomb.
Yeah.
I guess like, is this not a double turn with the market evidence that says that nuclear weapons are the health state of terror and that we should engage nuclear policy because it sparks broader political changes?
No, the Martin evidence on the case says that we can fight against militaristic nuclear policy in the status quo.
Well,
so if we conclude that the bomb is bad,
well, it says like it doesn't say just like nuclear, like the nuclear confidence, like generally it says nuclear weapons itself, and it talks about the nuclear threat. So I'm confused why this isn't like the same logic that the critique used for desiring the bomb.
well, because it says that we can fight against those things, but we should describe them as separate. So the nuclear, when we fight against the nuclear industrial complex, we should describe nuclear warheads as the warheads themselves and not fail to, analogize them to urban communities. The critique says the analogy is bad. The case argument says that we should challenge them separately,
I guess
which is
that makes
consistent
sense.
with the alternative.
Subpoint D on case says that movements for black liberation are ongoing and detached from debate. Why is this empirically true if empirics show that successful debaters or debaters broadly go out to like endorse and motivate activists and activism outside the space?
Well, one, there would have to be a causal connection between the reading of this 1AC and that.
Why I don't understand why it's true when you've read the procedure about models.
Because our models argument is like what debate should look like over the season,
Yeah,
not
well,
what they look like over the course of many seasons.
I feel like that's not responsive because you've made arguments for why there's no you said that there is no connection between this space and the on. It doesn't matter. It's confusing. We'll take the rest for 30 seconds.
Starting 10 minutes. Um, 8:48.
Are y'all doing all use time for this debate, or are you doing?
We are.
Okay.
Well, we ran the last 30 seconds across for prep, so.
But I think, isn't it 16?
16.
So if you 3.
We're
You'd
just
sit-
gonna do like regular.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, love it.
I'm not a numerical.
If
guy.
you all want it, just so you know, you have an extra 3 minutes of prep on top of the 8. So you have 11, whatever you said, 8,
8:48. So
You've-
11.
11:48. And for the next one, if you want to use 3 for cross-ex, you're more than welcome to. But you can also just be like, we're doing cross-ex, we're taking 11 minutes more prep.
That makes sense.
But yeah, do you?
We're just doing regular.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Here, let me send these cards out. Can you write it down? Just
Yeah.
The order is case, the K, and then framework.
Cool. Case. Oop. Okay. Framework.
Almost once.
Here you go.
case T and then K.
Case K. You good, Thur?
I'm good.
The bomb of anti-blackness is a nuclear force that radiates across civil society from slavery to mass incarceration to residential segregation. Black communities are marked as disposable through the logic of civil defense in order to make nuclear weapons and simultaneously absorb its toxic effects for the benefit of a dominant white society. That's Hurley. This is an ongoing apocalypse that is erased through the pedagogical whitewashing of nuclear wars, an incoming event and the separation of structural violence from the nuclear complex from desiring the bomb, which is the Beachy 7 is the Winnie C. performs atomic afrofuturism for a disarming of the civil defense logic. It is a process of animesis in which we connect the futures of nuclear violence to the past of slavery in order to envision world's black and brown liberation where the need for nuclear weapons and violent nation building do not exist. If Bagnanoff solves the entirety of the act, presumption 1, the role of the ballast to vote for the best black resistance project or J-term evidence says that black history's nuclear movements is constant rage which creates the conditions for the violence set above, but bearing witness to Winnie C is a form of post-memory that creates the conditions for successful revolutionary practice. That's what Nancy Del Sol's second triad for the affirmative presumption is a racist logic that says default to the scope, which our theory of power says is based on white supremacy, which means you should reject the team if they can and offer an alternative that solves for the status quo. 3, vote half where a good method good is good enough. Now there are presumption arguments proper. Yes, fill out for the bearing witness argument I said above. Yes, as the scope arguments that mobilize community, the J-term and Winnie C Del Sol evidence give the example of bearing witness to bearing witness to anti-black violence becoming the catalyst for or black civil rights movements, as well as nuclear jazz and the performance of the Winnie C mobilizing people to protest things like lynching, lynching in the South. Performance of the app and one and C now respond to the music of the affirmative as a performative dissent to the negative means that the critique or framer can't respond to the performative solvency that is needed to resist black violence in the status quo. Now, yes, the ballot is key. They did not respond to the performance and bearing witness arguments. Next, bearing witness to ongoing movements is good for the stuff I said above. The Martin evidence is backwards. Anti-nuclear movements fail when they don't center local systemic issues first. The resolution should be engaged around practice-oriented linkages, not hypothetical ones. Martin 90 social movements should be linked to social anti-war movements, adopting marriage, which have little role in social nuclear free size, little media roles in work groups, easy pressure, and performance with the nuclear war should be given priorities by what they cuts from their social movement. I don't oppose the world certain theory and actions. Highway evidence. We are not saying listen to black people. We are saying listening to futures that promote black liberation for the collective black communities marked as a death space. That is a dissent that pervades across every single off-piece because they have misunderstood the purpose of Afrofuturism. We are not saying listen, Curtis is the method of Afrofuturism as a broad mechanism is good. The critique first, permutation do both. You should reject the status quo desires of the bomb and embrace futurism and different articulations of it. Second, double turn. Their model of debate will continue the logic to master the bomb because of the nuclear posture and TVAs under their affirmative. It would be an inevitable attempt to control nuclear posture, i.e. and if you disarm for either hawkish or dove purposes, which means that it is a performative contradiction between the critique and framework, and is a reason to reject the team. It produces disconnected advocates that can conditionally engage in policy, which does make them authentic to the just cause of the oppressed. Embedding conditionality means that they should not be trusted when it comes to matters of liberation. They said they resist the desires of the bomb here, and then embrace the framework, which we will do later. No strategic concession from one flow to another because it's impossible to the affirmative because the negative can read double turns, concede one of them, and arbitrarily elevate their legal arguments, which is a voter for pedagogical integrity. The first card, 1, metaphors are good. Malcolm X was able to create alliances with survivors of the bomb by talking to civil rights advocates like Japanese organizers Yuriko Chiyama on the basis that the bomb of slavery was analogous to the bomb dropped in Hiroshima. That is good for mobilization and resistance. Second, this is a view from Nowhere Dissat. Even if they win the thesis of the language of proving so does nothing to actually advocate for black liberation. Ask yourself, what are the methods of resistance that the alternative posits? Obviously nothing, because the tag was made for an immigration affirmative that we did not read in this round. The 3, the feign unicity argument is vague, and you should not let new truancy articulations. The second card, this is a false equivalence. The metaphors that we use do not desire the bomb. We desire black futures where the bomb does not exist, whereas Matheson is criticizing doves and hawks who desire the bomb for the sake of controlling who does and does not get a bomb in the form of the amputee, or hawks who want to get a bomb and use it on racialized others. This false equivalence means that there is zero impact to the links. Next, we do not desire to get closer to the reality of the bomb. We have deconstructed the bomb to not be some sort of fantasy to strive through, but instead something that it already exists now, which was the
overview. Next, our theory is true. Nuclear weapons are an extension of New Age slavery that projects the ontological terror of blackness onto the world, which means a study of the Black Atlantic must confer is not going to extend the Williams evidence because I can cross-apply the Bagnov evidence of the one you see. The third card, one, co-option of rhetoric is non-unique. The right already sees migrants as nuclear arms to bomb via everything, which was an example in the one you see that they draw up, which means that co-option is non-unique and not a cause of the affirmative. The right has already latched on to apocalyptic framing of the status quo to argue that the end of whiteness is near, i.e. the Michi 23 evidence gives the example of the Turner diaries of white people writing about the end of civilization for white people, and that therefore we need to use or possess a nuke and use it against racialized others, whether that be China, North Korea, or black people, i.e. in the contextualized examples of bombing Philly against the MOVE organization, or for example bombing Tulsa, Oklahoma because it was a fear of black capitalism destroying white capitalism. Our argument is that these co-option spheres have already existed for decades, but only the affirmative can be a triad to solve it. Only the affirmative can deconstruct it, because to acknowledge the bomb is not real, but instead a fiction of civil defense that justifies racism. Can we deconstruct it in favor of black futures? That the Dino evidence is a double turn. It said it does nuclear metaphors too, when it says, quote, nuclear imagery like radioactivity itself defies containment, which we re-highlighted in green. A couple implications. Subpoint A, no impact, zero threshold to determine when it's bad, when it isn't. Subpoint B, reject the team. It holds pretentious double standards and lets the negative get away with anything, making being half impossible. It's impossible to protect the block since they can read contradictory evidence and it sandbags in 1 yard. It's a voter for pedagogical integrity. They'll say a simile is different from a metaphor, which polices people of color rhetoric and forces us to engage in white grammars, which is a voter for racism. Curse, I'm going to skip the card for now because I don't think we need it. The alternative, there's no link to the card. It's about metaphors in the mushroom cloud and college students using the metaphor of the mushroom cloud to sell things like Aeropostale jeans, which is a re-highlight that I've inserted. Obviously, the affirmative is not at that. The alternative does not solve the affirmative, because we made explicit reasons for why metaphors in the concepts of Afrofuturism is key. Go to framework now. 1, counter definition. Subpoint A, impact turn U.S. We some people challenge white exclusion. James 17, the racial conscience I contribute everybody defined in the U.S. We some people are supposed to we some people challenge the white. Nobody mentioned we either people promote. Subpoint B, disarm means to abolish American heritage, no day to abolish our forces. Next, their definition of disarm is over limiting, getting racist in-depth debates in the literature over particular weapons and crowds of substance by letting the negative get away with generic deterrence that sets against disarm of apps, which turns all their terminal impacts to clash. Subpoint C, nuclear forces include infrastructure and communication, or no law known day. Nuclear forces include nuclear community infrastructure facilities, including infrastructure operation and maintenance. Next, forces can include discourse. Richie 23 discourses define nuclear weapons, cultural which provide meaningful forces or economic cultures in which we reduce them. We meet our interference on 2 levels. 1, civil defense is nuclear communication, which is the press and no evidence. Second is that infrastructure includes civil defense. Hurley 20 apocalyptic forces nuclear mandate in life expanding archive authors against the MIC when the community's most vulnerable infrastructure violence policies continue civil defense, civil analysis waste. Gas a weapon. Next, we meet that because we some people disarm the nuclear forces civil defense, which means we abolish civil defense. Next, extend the counter model. Affirmation and engage revolution through a radical stage point, which means affirming the restriction of U.S. nuclear force through a critical perspective. This includes abolition, the international Afrofuturism, post-colonial revolt, and excludes affirmatives that don't restrict that. Subpoint A, limits teams that defend a reduction of nuclearism can still lose the T, and it confines apps to be tied down to the core of the topic, which allows for negative generics prefer reasonability. There's no way to quantify limits, and good is good enough, but over limiting is worse because the crowds also bolster anti-nuclear advocacy that will lose the perm on the negative and whitewashes the topic. Subpoint B, our negative ground is better for the reasons that the Curtis gave you at the bottom of the one you see. Conceding key judge instruction means that you should refuse any traditional understandings of what you think good or narrow testing of what good debate looks like, and instead extend the net benefits of the counter model. Subpoint A, epistemological go teams uncover the forgotten histories under the nuclear color line, learn to carve out counterpolitics and debates and make the space safer for marginalized communities. That makes debate become a training ground for future activism, such as Tales and Seattle creating leaders for a beautiful struggle, Flirts and MM starting up immigration law firms, which answers their inevitable no subject formation arguments. Now, their fairness argument. 1, colorblindness. This set procedural fairness and limits are standards that always break debates in favor of white upper class because our definitions for what is fair can only be created by those who had access to find it in the first place. 2nd, civil defense. This had the fear that chaos ruined the activity as a fusion with a fear of styles of debate coded as black Afro futures and demands that you recognize the linkages between conservative right-wing backlash to PRL and the use of framework as an infrastructure of violent racist deterrence that demonizes the ability for historically working class minority debaters to envision futures and debate for themselves. 1, AC Hurley, Preston, and Michis argue that when this nuclear pedagogy is taught in the classroom, it gets exported to create racially exclusive spaces in times of crisis and produces academic discussions that always seek to reformulate nuclear posture at the expense of black life. 3, prefer liberatory fairness. The counter-interpretation expands the circle of fairness to allow for a diversity of arguments that less marginalized debaters explore fields to explore knowledge into anti-racist action and advocate for anti-nuclearism from below. The clash arguments. 1, hegemonic anti-nuclearism. This had their division of ground resulting in majority dissect counterplan debates that happen on the same hegemonic terrain. NFU versus deterrence. Sole purpose counterplans still promote the U.S. over people of color, and the oversaturation of top-down articles causes the game to be rigged in favor of traditional arguments that make you winning the critique and uphill battle. 2nd, universal humanity. Dissect debates under their model assume a universalizing impact of extinction, which ignores how the effects of nuclear war disproportionately impact people of color. 3, atomic genocide. This on the ground. They want promotes a race to extinction, which requires the threat construction to racialize others in order to imagine who to use the bomb against, which sustains an implicit form of racial hierarchy where we learn the skills of policing who should and should not get a bomb instead of learning the skills to question the racism behind it all, and the steps steps we can take to challenge racist subjectivities, which is the double turn with the critique stuff that I mentioned before.
We have 13 for 13. Real quick, after reasonability, good is good enough, you made an argument about whitewashing the topic. What was that?
Give me a second. I think it was just that it's like an over-limiting model where we only prioritize a USFG focus is over-limiting because it overcodes the way that subaltern anti-nuclearism can also advocate for things like disarm, but through a different like actor specificity. So for example, TPNW is an organization conglomeration of global South states, not the US, and we think those are topical examples of disarmament.
As per Ritchie,
Yep.
Can the app then disarm any discourse that is related to the nuclear weapon?
As per Ritchie, perhaps. I mean, I think you would have to ask a more specific example. We've isolated civil defense not just as a discourse, but also as a form of infrastructure that targets like
what infrastructure does the app then disarm?
So it's like, for example, the way that civil defense is an infrastructure of violence against black communities is that as the Hurley evidence says, it says that the racialization of black space as a death space, as a ghetto space that has zero value, it is a form of non-infrastructure where that rhetoric allows us to disinvest from black futures. A disarming of civil defense pedagogies would reinvest into black futures and actually create the infrastructures necessary for black liberation.
I understand how it either creates infrastructure or it's attacks non-infrastructure, but my question is, you've read a piece of evidence that says it defines nuclear weapons, delivery platforms, the systems, command and control systems. What does the app do to disarm any of those things?
Well, that's why we said we should allow for disarm affirmatives that are able to specify certain types of nuclear forces. So that's why it's like there's weapons, but there's also systems, there's also command and control, infrastructure,
on
facilities.
The critique, you listed an example of MLK using a metaphor. What metaphor did
I said Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. What metaphor did Malcolm X use?
The bomb that was dropped on African Americans was racism. The bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima was like the bomb. Like that was like, I don't know the specific quote because it's like it was stuff like Malcolm X would use it a lot when talking to Yuri Kochiyama, but our argument is that those metaphors that Malcolm X used to connect to Japanese victim survivors was good because it made coalitions more likely. It broke down
So my question is more so like, what about metaphorization made coalitions more likely? Like, we can find commonalities in violence, agreed, but why are metaphors key to find those commonalities?
Because the commonalities that Malcolm X drew is that the bomb that affected people in Hiroshima, making that connection was good because it made like global solidarity more possible. Like it is a historical example that proves the metaphors of nuclear violence are valuable to do.
Okay, we're good. We're just gonna keep going.
I stopped at 9:46.
Are there cards?
Yeah, I'm sending you. Yeah, I just sent it. The order is T. Does everyone have the doc?
1 second. Yes.
You said it's T?
I need 1 second, sorry.
Does anyone have an objection? I get water real quick.
You just got a push. It's unlocked. Let's play myself.
No.
You heard that too, right? No.
No, I heard that
Yeah.
too. I just don't know if
It's-
the person's coming.
It's probably Diego. Oh, no, it's not like.
Nothing.
No.
It sounded like you knocked on the door, so like the door
Oh.
was locked,
No,
and
that
I
was
had
me.
said, "Okay." You did call that. That was.
Bro, I literally called it.
Yeah.
I literally was like, that was Diego.
That's
Yeah. I've been debating with you for too long, bro.
so funny.
Hey, listen, man.
Right.
After the season,
No. Alright. I think we're good.
Everyone's good?
Well, you said this is T, right?
Yeah, just T. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Debate begins with a negative response. It is unlike other outlets for expression since students are burdened with the necessary refutation within competitive constraints. All their venues, relationships already offer the chance to agree and collaborate. Only debate forwards to start terms of disagree or lose. Long Beach has already acknowledged and accepted the intrinsic value of the negatives role. They chose to introduce their pedagogy in a tournament format that requires rejoinder, respect the timer, and expect us to respond with the 1 NC, which is why they said if we advocated the app that we should lose instantly to the perm. 2 impacts 1 clash. The process contestation is prior question to the area of depth necessary for mastery of any subject matter, but it can't function in evidence-based format without a topical stasis that guarantees an even distribution of research opportunity to predict material before the panel is released. Lack of negation turns case their model produces momentary specialists who display mastery of methods in debate but are ultimately unprepared to defend their strategies against well-trained opposition. Absent testing, presume the one you see falls, setting up an independent presumption ballot. 2 fairness. It's an necessary norm to preserve because it maintains the equal prospect of victory for debaters in the tournament. A loss of fairness is significant, demands remedy because it undermines the very foundation of what makes debate a competition in the first place. That outweighs 1 mutual interest. Victory is the first and foremost priority of both us and Long Beach. Fairness is a shared value of all participants, so it must come first. Long Beach wants judges to fairly evaluate their arguments, even if they won't personally disagree. And while there might be different reasons for why people join debate, the bottom line is that when we get here, our preparation strategies and tactical choices are always with the win in mind. Otherwise, they can read the 1 seat and lose, and they would have no problem with that. They don't meet our interpret if they made that argument, because they're FXT at best, because they only endorse movements, and then they maybe restrict nuclear forces. Potentially, it's arbitrary links to our offense, eliminate links to government action and counterclaim competition, allowing the app to pick and choose which words in the rest are adhere to, creates infinite combinations of topical apps that are only related to one word in the res. We some people is a disaster, limits disaster. One, limits allow for a private actor fiat with any permutation of some people. It also makes their advocacy illogical, because if the U.S. is we some people, they disarm themselves. Neg on presumption, because they have people don't have nuclear forces. Two, not predictable. Some people may be in the U.S., but they are not the U.S. The same way that Texas is in the U.S. but isn't the U.S. Three, mixes burdens. The actor is defined by a political stance per 1AC cross-X, so we can't ever know who exactly is in the actor. Four, no offense. We explicitly define U.S. not as private entities to avoid the racist assemblage of white citizens' popular sovereignty, because we're not saying we the people good. Now, the disarm definition, not responsive. Even if disarm means to abolish armed forces, the actor doing that action must be the U.S. government, and they don't mean it because they don't abolish armed forces, which is the definition this provides. Conceding the premise of their disarm over limiting arguments, however, nuanced debates about specific weapon systems is good. It's a double turn with the anti-hegemonic nuclearism DA, which says focus on specific mechanisms is bad. They can't solve our offense, however, one concessionary ground competitively disincentivize clash causes teams to rush to extremist descriptions of the world that compete with everything. The fact that one could have read competing methodologies or abolition bad does not resolve our offense about predictability, and is bad because it produces dogmatism and encourages aversion. Every AF team has an incentive to say something subjective or less controversial, and every neg team has an incentive to prep one generic that applies to almost all AFs. Two, no radical limits. There are incentives to rush the margins of any topic, even if the advantages are where small AFs have no net ground, and they can always find an advantage to justify it. Three, metaphor is fair. Anything can be analogized to the topic. They can say anything is nuclear to describe that it's a large impact, and demonstrates that they can shift the terms of debate entirely. Cornell law is neg. They're reading our 1NC definition. They don't mean it, because nuclear forces must be more than just the infrastructure, because that part specifies at a minimum, which is the part I've highlighted in green. Now, their Ritchie definition, there's no intent to define. Ritchie is describing nukes, not clarifying and defining what they are. Ritchie also says nuclear weapons derive meaning from economic, cultural, and political forces, which is distinct from nuclear forces, which is the term in the resolution. Now, their counterinterpretation broadly, radical stasis point fails. It also mixes burdens, because how do you know what is radical enough in stasis, and they haven't explicitly defined what exactly is in topical app under their interpretation. That bright line needs to exist, otherwise any app can describe themselves as a radical stasis point, etc. Think about what Northwestern and MSUs would do with this counterinterpretation. District court apps, international actor fiat, individual politicians as actor, etc. are all topical under their term, which dodges on the ground, and they can metaphorize to infinite forms of structural violence that they eliminate instead of nuclear weapons. Our interpretation is most predictable. One, definitions good, common grammars are necessary for mutual agreement on the meaning of the resolution and create political literacy. Abandoning the lexical determinants, wholesale turns debate into an inaccessible polyculture and leaves students unprepared for political realities outside the classroom. Two, turn, it proves our offense with fairness and competition or ideological entrenched values that motivate us to interpret the resolution legalistically and read topicalities. Their Smith evidence also goes neg. He concedes that competition mediates debate, and the teams will run into them or rush to the margins. Since 20, I take concerns about competition seriously. Some affirmatives not defend perspective from literature, but an opinion of some affirmative teams would escape to the margins of the topic to avoid a debate. Says mechanism details matter most. Proves clash turns case and maximizing clash matters more than what we clash over. Since 20, KFM does not dismiss the need for policy details to be germane to the method of the app. Dismissing details and the project of organizing and go to power lets people with power set the terms of the discussion, which leaves power at the table. Now, the reasonability arguments, they're not reasonable since their definitions have no intent to define, and they didn't adhere to topical action, which is the crux of our offense. And there's no metric for what is good enough to be good is good enough. I prefer competing in terms of reasonability is more exclusionary, since students don't get to advocate for the bright line explicitly of what's in the topic, and it invites judge intervention to impose their convictions, which is far worse. No deference. One, debate is a college extracurricular, not a war zone. The critiques of the game are moot, because Long Beach are willing players who showed up and submitted entries despite knowing what that T and Nukes good would be read at this tournament, and that you were the judge for this tournament especially. If it was truly violent, they wouldn't do that. Two, no overcorrect or surrender. There's never a bright line, and you're perfectly capable of deciding the debate yourself. Being able to debate is itself a form of privilege and experience alone that doesn't make them overcorrect for it or be correct. 2AC on the case said it's about what's best for black resistance, not for individual black people, and that you shouldn't divert them to no link deference epistemology, so it doesn't link to them. Deference, if they agree for it, is a bad strategy, which is what they kind of called for at the end, that you should default to their experience. K many debaters have ideas worth critiquing, or they wouldn't offer it up for negation. Defaulting in the face of them would result in worse violence because they can default to their experience endlessly without creating a politically contestable methods. Now, the offense, they say, method debates. 1, T improves the anticipation of a stable mechanism, enhances the detail of K-links and all explanation. 2, their defense doesn't assume a model where the counterinterpret is universalized. Teams would have to prepare for the whole field rather than a select few K teams, as every app would be modeled against generics, and no threat of T means teams would be incentivized to make apps uncontestable. 3, perm is OP, neg links can't outweigh 1 AC advantages, but if they're that close, and app can consolidate prep around 2 to 3 positions, while negs have to prep infinite metaphors. 4, turning debates about organizing. Debate inherently judges truth value by how an argument gets answered. The insurmountable advantage of being app under their model will always inflate the value of the app strategies, because the neg will never be able to prepare for those infinite amount. They produce false equivalencies between strategies that win debates and one that we should truly explore. They say we exclude a critique history. 1, they have no causal evidence that there is an inclusive relationship between the lack of plan and marginalized participations. T's past is not its future, as move closer and closer to a readable defense of the topic that incorporates many of the app's concerns to exclusion of orgs, inclusion of people. T is a floor, not a ceiling, which will be explained below. Now, no colorblindness. DAT debates are a mutual negotiation, not an imposition of an hegemonic interpretation. App has equal power to say any of the resolutional terms mean anything else. The civil defense stuff. Topicality is not a fear of black debate. It is a substantive critique of the app's refusal of the resolution. 1, trivializing, equating reading T to civil defense is violent analogy that trivializes material violence and links to guilt dissuasion arguments, or judge guilt dissuasion arguments. 2, links to them. It's intrinsic to all disagreements. All negative arguments can be construed as civil defense against the app in some way, and as a fear of engaging them. 3, limits anything can be analogized or used in a metaphor to a nuclear force because it just has to display aggression, even just ill intent. The fact that the Treaty can say fairness is a nuclear deterrence should serve as a prelude to apps under their model that are about force inside and outside of debate. Now, the other stuff about the colorblindness, structural fairness stuff. 1, turn the resolution is the great equalizer. It sets the terms of debate and provides clear guidelines for teams to research. Abandoning fair procedures makes every fairness violation infinitely worse. Structural fairness requires procedures to function. Their model will be exploited by large policy teams who will monopolize their advantage on smaller squads. 2, answered above, fairness is a communal value shared by both parties and has extrinsic justification. 3, rejoinders, key speed, coaching, resource disparities can all be offset by clever strategies or new arguments that take coaches out of the room. You can anticipate and organize neg prep around common themes. Deviating from the resolution makes that unworkable, turning grounds into polemics and lets the app retreat to truisms. Now, group hegemonic anti-nuclearism, universal humanity, and atomic genocide. These are all excellent negative critiques of common advantages about proliferation and deterrence, but also not intrinsic to the topic. Apps can advocate a subaltern approach to disarm per cross-sects like Northwesterns, but they have to get to the end point of doing the policy disarm of the nuclear weapons and defending the United States as an agent. And there's no subject formation. Our offense half always theirs is contained in the because individual debates will never shape our subjectivity to the desire to win, proven by reading contradictory arguments across debates. At best, it's integral to a year's worth of research that's stable under our model, and the internal link to that is predictable limits. Our model also solves which TVA was the thing I explained above. They made one argument about like process debates bad. One, like every neg team is more likely to go for deterrence, etc. And say bad things under their model on the neg. They make every advantage for the app. Making the app more ethical makes the neg say less ethical things, which is the trade-off of why you need a balanced resolution.
Okay. You good?
Give me a second. Yeah.
Okay. Right after like the perm is OP stuff, you make this assertion that it's like the app win percentage skyrockets. Why is that true?
Well, it's more likely for the app to win when every
let's
argument made about
let's actually use like real statistics. I remember Jason Rayner came out with like the computer oriented stuff about rankings, and he said that the win percentage between the app and the negative is like directly 50%.
That's because of T.
Why is that because of T?
Because
okay, hold on. This requires you to like you got like a spreadsheet or something that shows that you know.
I mean, we don't, but we've made qualitative arguments for why an interpretation, the counter-interpretation,
qualitative arguments with no evidence.
I mean, we don't need to cite data because we're imagining the counter-interpret, we're imagining our interpretation.
Okay, but it's like these imaginations.
So
right?
Obviously there's no empirical data for each of those.
There's no empirical data to say the app win percentage skyrockets, which is why to me this always feels like a fear-mongering type argument where you imagine that KFs are going to ruin the activity. But in reality, I can think of so many times where teams read critiques on the negative and win against KF.
I mean, it may be true that they win sometimes. The argument
no,
is that
they win a lot of times.
The argument is that they are structurally less likely to win.
How? What?
Because the app is
inclined to say less controversial things. They're not forced to defend more controversial things, like
Okay,
i.e. the
so-
U.S.
so-
as an actor
So this less
of disarm
controversial
policy,
stuff.
or working with nuclear forces.
The Smith evidence. You know, I get you're trying to re-highlight the stuff, but it also says in the verse that we highlight, where it says the affirmative must demand a method of change that departs from the status quo that links to the core of the topic. Right? That requires apps to say reduce nuclearism to a certain extent. How is that not a controversial claim that the negative can guard off?
It's not controversial enough because the core of the topic is not defined objectively for anyone. We never know what apps are within the core of the topic. And the second thing is that we made an argument about how you can metaphorize nuclear forces to a number of discursive
If it's true
things.
that is just applicable to anything, why doesn't the limits to set apply to you as well?
I don't really understand the.
You said the stuff about how it's like we don't generally know what is good enough to determine a controversial
Because
action.
topicality sets the floor, right? At a minimum, you know that affirmatives will restrict the nuclear forces as defined
I want to spend
in our
my last time. Why is debating deterrence good?
Why is debating?
Yeah,
Well,
like,
one,
what is the
it's,
value behind it?
one, it's inevitable. Two, broadly, we're making
No,
arguments.
I get that it's inevitable. My question is, why is debating it good? Your model posits a model
for clash,
where
right?
that's it.
Because the
No,
benefits we
I'm
get.
not talking about clash or the benefits behind those things. We can get clash anywhere else. The content behind debating deterrence good. Why is
That's
that
like
valuable?
not as relevant compared to the depth of debates that we have. So the
Why is
primary
that
skills
not,
we would
why
ever
is that
achieve
not
from
relevant?
debate.
We've
The
got a
primary
bunch of
I can
evidence about
explain.
civil
So
defense
more than
logics and how it
content-based,
mobilized
but
anti-black
The,
figures.
the main benefit if we get any skills from debate, the main one that we get is not from the arbitrary content we read into it, but rather from the idea that we must do in-depth research, and we get better at determining right from wrong based on that research and intrinsic disagreement. But the internal to all of that is predictable limits, because research, not debating itself, shapes subjectivity. It does.
When are cards percent?
Wait, you said the order was the critique in their case?
Yep. Actually, we're going to take this one.
Yeah, same thing. Okay.
Okay, sorry. Case. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's- I'll start in 10 seconds.
Understanding the nuclear infrastructure beyond the literal infrastructure, nuclear infrastructure, weapons, and equating the two is violent turns case. Perms are non-starters, links are DAs to the permanent status for a VI for education argument of responsibility, not forcing the app to commit this caution is bad because it means to get away with actually makes candidates worse for the perm double bind becomes unbeatable. Think about it. The app has said metaphorization of nuclear weapons good. We have impact turned into the cannot logically permute. Metaphorization like the tag the one you see. Preamble says quote the nuclear bomb of slavery unquote. They continue quote the bomb of emancipation for proclamation and plan equate civil defense to nuclear weapons. The one you sees metaphorization of nuclear forces repeats the concealment thesis of nuclear criticism. The effort to communicate structural violence in terms of nuclear forces merely invests in fantasy of nuclear warfare. The one you see continues a process of repetition compulsion whereby hawks and doves desire the bomb. In other words, the one you see scales up descriptions of structural violence to apocalypse and nuclear forces, forcing descriptions and resistance to be wedded to nuclearism. The alternative instead scales it down, which solves the case, but the link alone turns at the alt-right's addiction, apocalypse and survival. So means they respond to the ass exposure without structural violence. It's apocalypse to exacerbate that structural violence. In the same way, they enjoy war precisely because it's big and bad. They'll enjoy structural violence because it's apocalyptic. The one sees impacts are reason to vote against it. Further metaphorization of the arsenal activates and desire. They've dropped the external impact as resentment to believe in atomic futurism, and that voting out somehow awakens us to the violent history of nuclear weapons, turns the ballot into a fleeting moment of enjoyment that forces us to revisit the pain of living in a chaotic, disordered world. The one he appeals to atomic Afrofuturism is the most insidious form of affective management. Disarmament becomes the boulder we push up the hill, only for it to come crushing down on us on the way back, where we realize we've devoted so much time and effort to the cause, only to feel the effect, which results in self-hatred, internalizing guilt of nuclear oppression, and turns the case. This is offense, we should plainly name the material forces at work in their literal capacities to more effectively dissociate from racist ideology. That means the link alone turns the case and the alt solves it. Gut check. None of the movements cited in the 1EC evidence have ever used the phrase nuclear forces to describe slavery. If you got on the megaphone and direct action and used this analogy, it would cause confusion, not political sentiment. There's a reason that, and there's no reason that analogy is generative. It is just aft posturing, and they don't have a single card that says it. Their reading of the variety of affirmatives on the topic at the top of the 1EC proves that despite declaring not to care about the bomb, CSU has a wounded attachment to the nuclear war debates to reject the 1EC's effort to reveal the truth of nuclear weapons. Facts and 15. The bomb was a currency of manifestation, terror, the nuclear destruction connected by reference and remedy the real of Freud's Forte game of the day. We respect to simulate destruction, salvation, nuclear imagination, modified into apocalyptic imagination of reference to terrorism, pandemics, zombies, and feels the way that no other crisis be to the economy of investment that animates cultural salvation, the product of the struggle, which were unmeaning responses should instill skepticism in the ethics of strategies that confront nuclear bombs by challenging and discursively concealment thesis. The nuclear terminology conceals the reality for the terms of its fine and shop public intellectuals and college debaters. The implication is that the new vacuum debate would democratic deliberation and construction of the nuclear state. There is a contested debate is the key for resistance to atrocities, indigenous people subject to uranium mining, testing, population confounded, targeting, and downward exposed radioactivity. That card is marked at radioactivity. Now, the double turn, it is certainly not one or evidence describing nuclear power plants and says their effect or radioactivity. None of that is an analogy that metaphorizes the bomb in terms of other forces that are outside of nuclearism. Instead, it says nuclearism is the internal link between those things. Topicality is not a double turn with this because we said you should attack the physical infrastructure of nuclear weapons and not analogize it to slavery. It's not a disconnected advocacy, but Kondo in this case is good because it results in testing which are vital for strategies against racial injustice. It is not strategic considerations because you cannot say things on the K applied to the topicality or other ways, or the 2AC should have done it and is their burden to do so. The 1AC and now the metaphors are good and energizing thing. They have nuked their ability to develop offense as per their 1AC card. They're bagged off, and 19 evidence says, quote, must not only draw from Dara's anti-apocalyptic missives. It says that we should not use apocalyptic imagery to describe the nuclear forces. Anything else done so derails and de-radicalizes ability to draw connections between the two. Their explanation and cross-examination just shows that we should find the commonalities and violence that exist across the spares, but every link turns the case argument made above means that we should not metaphorize it, even if Malcolm X did. The 1AC metaphor is not energizing candidate, and 13 nuclear weapons absorb the metaphysical violence applied to the paper, should absorb the bomb can be used just by any organ or government or merchant to death or their savior. Dogmatic narratives and supported by symbolic proximity that characterize it and accessible vehicle of nuclear weapons, basing narratives on metaphors is imprecise, even if they're structured because they're fixed to certain arbitrary features that dynamic linkages established on the metaphor. Now, it is certainly not a view from nowhere. I'll do the alternative here. View the alt as a pick out of the nuclear force in the plan. We view that some people should disarm the United States as civil defense through atomic futurism. The evidence that says that it just results in genes, etc., is wrong. It describes that as a neg example and says that when we create the abstract image of the bomb that is metaphorized, it creates the assortment of agendas that does not target specific things. The alternative instead understands that textures of violence distance themselves from the political economy of reality that views nukes, and that targeted action is actually what invigorates movements against it in the status quo. So the alt invigorates movements and solves the case, but the metaphors themselves abstract themselves from what the nuclear force itself is, which is not able to solve. The quote, the metaphors we use do not desire the bomb is irrelevant because acknowledging the bomb is real is not our argument, but instead we've disagreed with what you characterize as the bomb. Yes, that means you get closer to that bomb in the status quo, proven by the link argument above. Co-option of rhetoric being non-unique is wrong, even if some of the alt-right uses apocalyptic now via their argument about bombing Tulsa, Oklahoma. They ensure that slavery becomes a national security concern by escalating it to the level of nuclearism that intensifies moments of violence, which means it independently outweighs magnitudinally. Acknowledge the bomb is real, answer above. Nuclear metaphors because testing is not a double standard. It was consistent because it's in the context of explicit nuclear weapons of energy that happens, which answers the double standards argument. Pedagogy proves that clash should outweigh on topicality. It was not a simile. We will not make this argument. Metaphors of the Aeropostale genes was answered on the link above. Now the case, the large atomic futurism able to solve movements was link turned via the critique above. Presumption is not racist. It says that it must challenge the status quo. We've to challenge the reading of the music in the 1AC by reading a piece of evidence that says that's not gender. The critique also says the alt turns the case alone, which means it is not a DA to the alternative, and the alt consult.
Uh, 848, sorry. Question is international fiat on the page of Reason Project Team?
Sorry, what's up?
You said that international active fiat is bad as a Reason Project Team.
No, just like your
Just a
counter
definition.
interpretation allows international
Okay,
activities.
that's fine.
That's 219.
That would be the case, the critique framework.
There's like one card on the critique. I'm sending it out.
Case,
Yeah.
and there was a card.
I just sent it.
Can you also put that
did send it.
highlighting?
Bro, they're highlighted
Of what?
on the framework page.
I thought you already did. Oh, the
No,
rehighlights,
that
yeah.
one.
Okay, I took 7 seconds.
You took prep for that?
Yeah.
That was crazy. Okay. Are we all good?
Yes.
Civil defense and the anti-black nuclear force consolidates white identity together and mark black nations in the death space. Atomic affirmation disarmed by refusing to engage in civilization discourse and imagine black future to be liberatory faces for black librarian witness to the performance. Otherwise, he is urgent because of conceived unique question of black anti-nuclear advocacy is erased of traditional versions of the topic of me that we have a battle key statement. They do not refuse to respond to the music and the performance. Otherwise, he is a performer the disadvantage. They are dropping out with the performance. The presumption argument won the world battle to vote for the best resistance. Black resistance project or black gender evidence says that history of the black nuclear movement is constantly erased indicates the condition for violence said above, but bear witness to the ways he is a former post memory that creates a condition for revolutionary societal practices. So evidence dropped that black history is under constant erasure. Mean that your ethical imperative it does happen in the future for it. The critique proper go to not one perpetrating do both resist status quo desires of the bottom and the break futurism sex is not separate from the cover waiting that you don't have a link to the half also double turn model debate will continue that logic to master the bomb because nuclear posture is inevitable attempt to control data evidence about the hawks and warmongers who literally want the bomb be alteration nuclear policy which is what topical version of their album what topical base under the model will look like as per comments valid reason rejected team for produces a disconnected actions that conditionally engage with the policy who doesn't make them authentic and who it doesn't make them committed to commitment to liberatory future just and means that embedded conditionality you should not be trusted. They should not trust when it comes to matter liberation. They said balance are bad when we said they that they're good. Then they're good. Other fellows said that picks affirm the app this terms is good. No certificate contentions for one was another impossible to be advocate of neck and greed. Double turn can see one of them and arbitrarily elevate link arguments. Voted for pedagogical integrity. Also a view from the word this out was dropped even if they win the death side language doing so. Does nothing language like repetition compulsion is not energized moves on the ground now. But nuclear jazz is sensible and require metaphorical to do the work that's Lacey Del Sol, Jantrum, and backing off second card is the false clothing stuff. Metaphors that we don't our metaphors are not that we desire the bomb, we desire black features in one where black violence does not exist in nuclear bomb villages where Master is criticizing them, the Hawks desire the bomb for taking controlling who does resilience the bomb in the NDT, or the war hard to dig the bomb regional race and the other that's the false clothing stuff. Also third card cooperative is not unique, drop that right. People already see nuclear bombs to prove that the right is already touched on the apocalypse framing already targeted and the whiteness is here, but only alternative can resolve it through bearing witness. That's the Jantrum evidence and the soul evidence. Also the only app can deconstruct it because we have to acknowledge that the bomb is not real, but instead of fixing a simple death and justified racism and structural accusation that takes out the detachment argument, the double turn, they dropped the double turn, the evidence does it too, but instead nuclear imagery, like radioactive and stuff, that defined the Cayman rehighlighting green. There are a couple of indications one is no impact due to threshold the term was valid isn't being rejected team hold potential for attention double standard let the negative away from being effervescent and makes being after also voted for impeccably. Also the argument they said that it was only about radiation does not apply because it still applies for violence to be contextualized to the metaphor. It proves that there is no argument to also metaphor exists without the all explanation where with a bunch of Vegas version that energized moves with no active those in the hit what 21 for Microbank nuclear prevent elimination of global and previous Microbank saying thank you not for the use of the bomb the race and the activity for Vietnam and colonial also performed the competition that literally said we nuke our ability to win the K and when our approved after reading and everyone would disagree with the type of newspeak because the since has acting nuclear provider rejected team they having in their own through a metaphor with desire the bomb describe how we categorize the strategy in this debate they are unethical advocates that should be rejected because they perform but also picks on the ab back says the metaphor forth. Our key also picks our voting issue and anti-black arguments as a reason to reject the team, and also people like Texas to falsely accuse black people for doing bad things and then stealing their logic and labor, which the anti-black arguments should be rejected at cost. Go to the framework now. 1. Judge, instruct, and tell your role in the debate to reject your traditional framing of debate. You have been effectively trained to understand debate solely versus plan for the decide, which is always detriment to students who want to engage in more radical matters. The reason why you put your back for the K is because that portion in paradigm, which means that you should adjust your judging calculus and able to, even if you're reluctant of nihilism, also the new responses like are there new responses are fake when they said decide debate for yourself. If you expect to frame this is wrong, it's not a reason why you spent. I'm in the one team calling you out because we expect unfairness in the way you evaluate John's traditional modes of debate. You've been trained under a hegemonic lens that's not inclusive to minority voices. Also extend our definition 1. U.S. is a contract convert because the challenge is white supremacy in debate. That's James. No international actor. Our definition is between the government and citizens, not the international actor. Also B. Resolve means to analyze D. Merriam-Webster. D means to abolish nuclear force, include infrastructure with including the self-defense and the declaration of nuclear force. That's Hurley and Cornell. Metaphor connections are good and predictable as well. We saw under our counter model, or we should extend it. We should engage resolution around case point. We saw their standard 1 women's team that don't defend or reject nuclear facilities. C. Also B for visibility. No way to quantify. C. Negative ground is better. You can still recase like deterrence as long as you win. Link this is my theory. Counterformance is generic K's like the one you read, etc. All prove that they have some sort of generic ground that allows for good competition under our model. The net benefits 1. Pits with growth teams uncover ground history to make nuclear activism more possible and import your talents and lethal. All prove B. Activism because of Jane Crown for features and talent. CL creating relief, reconstruction, etc. When all proves that barrier when it spells out that when they see this will also see subject information, KPK debates produce subject information that allows you to think through the pedagogy of the press to create better activism. We are predictable system. You have Smith said you have a germane ties the topic which takes up their metaphors. Let me decide because everything is not tied down to academic literature. That's reasonable offense, fairness. Go to now 1. Colorblindness, sad, procedural fairness and limits are argued against people of color in favor of white upper class because our definition of what is fair only be created by those that access to the first. And also C. And next and send the civil defense to feel that can't prove the activity is form of civil defense where you do the code debate as black Africans to amend you to recognize linkages between these things to prove that you should reject your biases in favor of the dignity civil defense. Also no dogmatism. This after education is dogmatic wonder argument that supposes loss of fairness is remedy is police and logic that seems to criminalize us for being criminalize us as a reason to reject the team because it's the same logic for racial incarceration. Also yes, civil defense you drop the precedent which proves it is about academic spaces. Also prefer liberatory fairness drop where the counterpretation spans circle allow for a diversity of arguments. To see, I'm gonna go to the Swiss Science TVA stuff. There you go.
No, answer the classification.
Classes and hegemonic anti-nuclear decide their division and ground rules and DA counterplay that rely on say hegemonic terrain, which are bad because they increase the atomic genocide, which I cross-play here. Also go to the TVA now. 1 convergence decide teams will only read the decide in front of black debaters with a free attack racist institution. Also the no TVA and no assault advocate mean that you're rejected because it proves that the app doesn't exist. Also cross the Swiss side debate to now 1 all this has applied. Second is absolute interpretation because the disarm not committed on negative. Also extend the interconvergence decide. Swiss side debate says we should only read the app on the neg as from interconvergence to prevent the critical apocalypse in debate. It's cross-applied to the civil defense side, which you should reject in favor of principle of growth under our model.
Everyone good? A topic that forces the app to defend a controversial departure from the status quo is best. The app begins debates, discussion with the neg, determines the endpoint and depth of that discussion. For every ethical advantage they confer to the app, they make being neg that much harder. And predictability for the neg guarantees absolute predictability for the app. They only need debate to make sure generics like deterrence, assurance, and Gemini good, which every neg team rushes to because it's the only way to contest a large swath of unpredictable apps that are forced to defend the most controversial parts of the topic, i.e. the U.S. government as the actor and nuclear forces as the physical weapons. Clash outweighs in straight terms the case impacts and Thur framework offense debate center on predetermined specific points of difference require third and fourth line responses, which teaches in-depth research or argumentative skills. Debate is not good because it produces good content-based outcomes. If it is good for skills, it is only because it provides us with tactics for engaging and processing information based on class rigor and the openness to the possibility of being wrong. This is our TVA and switch side argument. Switch side solves the case. App reads, apps read a U.S. should disarm even with a subaltern nuclearism frame, and next could then read their app on the K as disarm under the state-focused lens, for instance. There's no impact to state-centric debate explained at all in the 1AR, and in fact, they said they explicitly get the deterrence DA on the neg under their interpretation. Each teams under our interpretation, however, would prefer better and better responses in the context of those specific arguments, and if they're right at the end of the year through testing their theory in the context of specific policies, we would come to a more accurate conclusion about the efficacy of state action in disarm, which is a dropped argument about how only we can shift mindsets toward theory, and the clash solves the case. The 1AR dropped that their model develops into the most extremist generics because negs are forced to find anything that disagrees with the large swath of apps under their topic without predictable limits, so they're more likely to read the arguments they think are bad under their interpretation, and negs are forced to say them even when they don't want to. They've also dropped false positive, insulating the 1AC from testing creates unverifiable claims that should be treated as false, absent rigorous scrutiny. No new arguments. The 2NC explicitly flagged it as presumption, so this is auto-negative ballot. Second, fairness. Competition mediates debate benefits even if we join for different reasons. Drop examples from Norm's Long Beach. Subscribe to like dropped arguments are true and the expectation rejoined apps demonstrate they agree, which wouldn't exist if debate was merely a referendum on subject formation. The sole role of the judge is to evaluate clash in one debate, not to cast a final character judgment on our opponents as people or the morality of the state. Fairness is a priority given their voluntary participation. They believe there is some value in debating the only fairness upholds the 1AR drops our second line warrant that it underpins their argument as rendering any assessment about impact terms, and even their arguments about judge correction require fair evaluation of those arguments. Long Beach. Now the first are reasonability style arguments. They're not reasonable since their interpretation definitions have no intent to find and they didn't adhere to topical action, which is the crux of our offense. There's no metric for what is good enough, or there's no bright line for that, so it should be rejected wholesale, which will be on the counter interpretation below. Instead, prefer competing interpretations. Reasonability is more exclusionary since students don't get to advocate for what exactly is the bright line of the topic, and it invites judge interventions to impose their convictions. There's no overcorrect arguments that they've dropped that they willingly showed up and submitted entries despite knowing you were the judge and despite knowing T and Nuke's good would be read as topic. If it was truly violent, they wouldn't do it. And they've dropped that there's never a bright line and you're perfectly capable of deciding the debate itself. Being able to debate itself a form of privilege, and experience alone does not make them correct about these things. So you can accept some KVK debates are good, but it's less probable that they're good, which will be explained below. Now, the counter interpretation, there's no bright line for core of the topic or germane ties to the topic. They dropped the agent and mechanism mixes burdens alone because you have no way of knowing what apps are T or even who's in we some people because it's a political stance. They can't solve our offense even if good KVK debates exist. They're structurally less likely to be as in-depth because of a lack of predictable limits. There are incentives to rush the margins of any topic, even if advantages may be some worse for small apps. Small apps have no net ground. They can find any advantage whatsoever. Any literature that describes nuclear, analogizes nuclear to structural violence. Every app team has an incentive to say something subjective or non-controversial, and neg teams pre-tournament prep is inapplicable, so they rush to extremist generics. First agent under their interpretation and restriction of nuclear forces cannot just be deployed by Long Beach, but a permutation combination of 300 million other U.S. residents, 100 which thousands of grassroots organizations, etc. And they've dropped what policy teams with their interpretation, which would make it infinitely worse, like individual state actors, international actors, etc. 2EC didn't counter define resolve, but proceeding resolved is what matters. Analyzing nuclear forces is bad. Disarm is non-responsive. The 2NC also explicitly conceded the premise of their disarm over limiting arguments. Nuanced debates about specific weapon systems is good. It's a double turn with the anti-hegemonic nuclearism DA, which says focus on specific mechanisms is bad. The Cornell law evidence says negative. They've dropped it says nuclear forces include at a minimum a weapon, so they don't meet their own counter-interp, which is auto-neg. They also linked to their offense because the 1AR explicitly said they allow deterrence. Now, debate of subject formation is wrong. This was largely above. There's no link to our offense because no single debate or debate about a single argument commits us to a universal ethical system or theory of the world. And method debate stuff's one. They've dropped T, improves them anticipation of a stable mechanism, and enhances the details of K links and all explanation and contextualize specific policies and advantages instead of broad IR concepts. 2, perm is OP, neg links. They can't outweigh when you see advantages if they're so close together, especially given apps can consolidate prep around 2 to 3 positions, while neg have to prep infinite metaphors, which is worse. 3, and now, fairness isn't inclusive and liberatory fairness fails. 1 term they've dropped the resolution is the great equalizer. It sets the terms of debate and provides clear guidelines. Abandoning fair procedures makes every fairness violation infinitely worse because structural fairness requires procedures to function. Their model will be exploited to make it worse for them as well, and they've dropped it. They link because fairness is a communal value, no civil defense. DA topicality is not fear of black debate, is a substantive critique of the app's refusal of a resolution. They've dropped it. It's trivializing because equating reading T to the racialized incarceration is a violent analogy that trivializes material violence, and it links to them because they also exclude some forms of apps. They've also dropped T as not an imposition but a mutual negotiation, and they had equal power to say otherwise. Now, the final stuff about hegemonic nuclearism, DA, T doesn't require it. This is all just a negative. TVA doesn't require an advocate because it's not our burden, but we pointed to apps like Northwestern's and Emory's. If their app as a K loses to the perm, so does every K of their app, and it wouldn't, which was above. Now, the critique. Perfon is not a reason to reject the team. 1, topicality is prior. Perfon is what happened in the debate. Topicality is whether this debate should have happened in the first place and whether or not we're burdened with rejoinder. 2, Millington, nuclear imaginary. 1, and T evidence cites nuclear power, which does not analogize it to any of that. Concede no impact. That means no DA to we link 2, and Perfon is not making it making app impossible. It's also a logical prior question because we beg the question of whether or not the 1 EC independently of we link 2, the 2 EC or 1 AR can concede 1/2 of the double turn for offense, and it simply doesn't link. The case stuff, the ballot isn't key to any of their offense. The only role of the ballot is to decide whether or not which role of the ballot are answered above.
212. Case in the favor.
Cool.
You good?
Anti-blackness is an apoplectic that forms from slavery to Jim Crow to segregation, mass incarceration, gentrification. Black space is a death space that is both infrastructural and discursively marked as non-value. This is a simple defense logic that requires black death in order to cohere the nuclear order, which means that if we are winning any impact turn to the pedagogy of the model debate, then that means that we have impact turn any benefits that their model debate offers. The core question you need to answer by this debate is that what we clash over matters. Any risk that we are winning in any offense on hegemonic anti-nuclearism, etc., or any offense against the clash arguments which have been severely undercover means that you vote affirmative for a model debate that is try or die for a radical status point. Afrofuturism dismantles the way this pedagogy spills down into the base. Since the 2AC, they have dropped the precedent way evidence that says that civil defense is incubated in educational spaces, i.e., we learn to militarize the mind for us to be scared of black future, scared of where black life thrives in order to militarize ourselves against it, because we feel as though black futures are unfair because we can't predict what it will look like, or we can't predict what the limit of it is. Our argument is that you should be extremely skeptical because of the key judge instructions that we have extended throughout this entire debate. You, who Tyler Thur, as a person who has not engaged in KVK debate throughout the majority of your career, but instead always have been antagonistic to it, means that you should surrender your understanding of what KVK debate can look like, and instead take the leaps into this. That turns any other arguments about the deterrence logic, which I will answer later, but it also turns fairness, because the fear of a solid debate coded as black is the reason why topical debate becomes a zone of self-defense and militarizes the mind, and for us to be militarized against blackness, i.e., think of the reasons why subgroups under their model debate, like the PRL, right-wing media harassing black debaters. It is because the militarization of fairness that has entangled itself with the militarization against black people in debate, which means it is try or die for a different model debate that can secure black futures. Go to framework now. One, the counter definitions are good, precise, and lead to a better form of debate. The we some people argument includes people that are racially excluded from the U.S. government because their accrued evidence sustains a constitution that historically excludes racialized people of color. That answers the limits this said. But one, I would rather allow diverse perspectives and liberatory fairness than rely on colonial definitions that only include white people, because when we think of the USFG, that is a civil defense logic that refuses to engage with so-called anti-nuclear disarm. Second, they drop the liberatory defense argument should expand the diversity of fairness, even if it expands the limits a little bit more, because it instead is a more accurate reading of who should be allowed to engage in anti-nuclear activism. Nuclear forces include infrastructure and communication. Civil defense is a form of communication, because they dropped the Bridgie 23 evidence that proves that we made our own interpretation argument, because civil defense is both a logic that sustains nuclear weapons, which means it is itself a force, but it is also an infrastructure because it divests from black futures. The affirmative Afrofuturism by abolishing to refuse to engage in deterrence logic and challenge the disinvestment of black space for Afrofuturists. Disarm 3, their definition over limits conceded. This gives the example, such as, for example, they would over limit conversations that come from so-called anti-nuclearism, such as, for example, indigenous advocacy, removing ICBMs. Second, this affirmative 3, Marshallese nuclear submarine affirmatives, and it would be overcrowded by deterrence decides that don't get to the nitty-gritty of our model. Second, the counter interpretation is good. Affirmative to engage the revolution through radical states point, which means affirming the restriction of U.S. nuclear forces through a critical perspective. This includes abolition of the international Afro-future and post-colonial revolt, and excludes apps that don't restrict nuclear forces. Limits reasonability is good enough because teams that don't defend a reduction of nuclearism can still lose the T. They conceded all the examples of 2AC and 1A are negative ground, which should act as defense to all of their fear-mongering about the loss of class. You can still read case terms like deterrence. They said as long as you win a link and justify the theory, which acts as defense to their supposed double turn arguments, you can read counter performances, and our generic critiques are better, like futurism versus pessimism, dual power versus our anarchism, line back versus grander relationality, because they promote liberation strategies over top-down approaches that re-entrench power relations. Drop the net benefits that we lead to activism, because debate becomes a training ground for future such as Towson, Seattle, creating leaders for a beautiful struggle, Florida and MMS starting up immigration law firms, and performance filling out as the 1AC Del Sol 23 evidence, which means we have a better chance of subject formation, which means our model debate has more chance of a spillover than theirs. The TVA, they did not extend any TVA, which means you should be extremely skeptical of the obvious. They conceded that no solvency advocate is a voting issue, because it allows them to imagine future scenarios that just won't ever occur. It relies on an appropriation of black scholarship and black movements, which will result in war skills, because it is the example of how white people appropriate black scholarship, but never actually tend to honoring it in the right way. Next, what we clash over matters. Conceding all of the specific examples like hegemonic anti-nuclearism, their division of ground results in counterplan debates that happen on the same hegemonic terrain, and if you versus deterrence, SSO versus counterplan still promote the U.S. over people of color, which results in a form of atomic genocide in which the grounding one promotes a race to extinction, which requires the threat of the construction of racialized learners in order to imagine who used the bomb, which sustains an imperial implicit form of racial hierarchy, where we learn the skills of policing who should and should not get a bomb, instead of learning the skills to question the racism behind it all, and the steps we can take to challenge racist sensitivities. Any chance of subject formation which was dropped means that you should vote for our model, because they have not said what their model results in, but we have said that our model results in better people. They say contribution controversy good. Drop that our Smith evidence also agrees that clash is good, but also drop ground. For example, futurism versus pessimism is a good debate that does not require you to read deterrence which acts as defense to their or teams which still read deterrence that set against you. They say you could also read you could also do futurism versus psycho-futurism versus disability, etc. The switch side arguments are answered by the ancient convergence this side, whereas people where ancient convergence this side where people would only respond to this by either extinction outweighs or universalizing discourse, but also they conceded that the perm or that the af on the negative would lose on the perm because it also advocates for disarm the deterrence argument. Remember, you only get if you justify, which answers all of their doubts. Aren't arguments they say that we lead to extreme generics? No, this is a form of victim blaming because you shouldn't blame people for what negative teams decide to do. The testing argument is not an example of presumption because the list of negative ground answers this. The fairness underpins the argument. No, we spent 1 minute explaining to you why we disagree with your judge paradigm, which shows that we are not expecting fairness from you. We know that we are in a fuck position with you in the back, which is an example of why we spend so much time disproving the concept of fairness and why their model of debate only results in worse policymakers. We are the only ones with a subjectivity shift claim.
Good debate.